It's very sad to see what's happening with the music industry. So let's go, baby.
Is officially on its way to the bottom as over 150 employees in one of the biggest major labels in the industry got laid off, and a whole host of artists have also been getting dropped. This marks a very important time in music as there's currently a very big shift taking place, mostly in relation to the documented plateau of revenue from streaming, something that does affect the entire industry as a whole. Atlantic Records, which is the home label to some of the biggest stars in music, recently reported that they're downsizing.
Who is Atlantic actually owning, by the way? Let's check that quickly. So these, let's see. These are the ones that are signed to Atlantic Records. So not many people actually know. CK, I know. CKO, I know him. And Coldplay, I know them. But just for people to understand what we're actually watching and who's actually giving the boom boom, the nine nine. There's a lot of people signed here. Gucci Mane, I know him. Jason Derulo, we all know Jason Derulo. Jack Harlow, we know, of course. Lizzo, we all know because of all the fat jokes. Like they got some big ones here, right? Just to give you an understanding.
As a part of a major restructuring effort. It was reported that over 170 people working at the major label got laid off. This includes people in the management sector, people from the marketing department, and a whole lot of the employees put in positions to make.
If 170 people is like out of 2,000, then it's a 5% layoff. But if it's 170 people out of like 500, that's suddenly almost 40% of their whole staff. So it makes a massive difference, It makes a massive difference.
Make the artist win. A lot of musicians are also suffering in the process. If you're not aware, a whole lot of artists have also been getting dropped from the label. The names of those artists are not known yet, but let's just say that these record labels sign thousands of new artists every single year, knowing that 95% of them are not going to succeed, which leaves them with a very small pool of winners. And they're banking all their money on that small percentage of artists breaking even, and an even smaller percentage out of those coming out on top and becoming big names and successful names that makes them a lot of money. There's also been a wave of music executives stepping down from their respective positions.
I wonder if this has something to do with all the Diddy things going on now. The fact that a lot of the big boys have been in cahoots with a lot of big boys that's been doing nasty things, and there's a whole topple in the music industry. Because I've watched a few artists that are completely solo, and they're like, every time I sell a ticket, I make that money. And I'd much rather have that than the record label set everything up and then make money on me. And I can understand both ways, but I think I would want to be independent.
Kevin Liles, CEO of 300 Entertainment, which is the home to Young Thug and Fetty Wap, stepped down after working at the label for over a decade. Julie Greenwald, chairman of Atlantic Records, is also stepping down in January. This may not seem all that major to most people, but it actually is. We're seeing a very interesting shift taking place right now because streaming has undoubtedly dominated the music industry for the last decade.
Same with the film industry. The film industry has been completely dominated by Netflix for a while. And now that everybody wants a streaming platform, then suddenly Netflix gets too much competition. And what happens when Netflix gets too much competition? Well, it's very simple. What does that mean? Well, Hollywood is getting killed, right? And if Hollywood is getting killed, there's going to be less competition as well. But let's be honest, Hollywood has been the monopoly for a very long time. So maybe that's the same in the music industry.
Music streaming was introduced in the early 2000s with Napster, which is an American peer-to-peer file sharing application primarily associated with digital audio file distribution that originally launched on June 1st, 1999. With the launch of Spotify in 2008 is when it became a staple in the music business. It's been the dominant source of income for the music industry since the mid-late 2010s.
And yet the artists make almost no money, baby. Very sad. Very sad.
It's overtaken physical sales and digital downloads as the primary revenue driver. Now, that's been the case for a while, but it does look like the streaming revenue growth in the music industry is appearing to slow down. Although it has grown steadily for years, recent trends suggest that the rapid expansion seen in previous years is now tapering off. As an example, Sony Music reported a modest growth in its streaming revenue in the second quarter of 2024, which is lower than expected compared to previous years.
Well, this is another problem I have with companies. Why is it so bad to have a modest growth? Why is it not? Why do you have to have like 600% growth on a company that's already grossing 6 billion? Like, isn't 3% good enough? Like 4% quarterly? Like, isn't that good enough? Like, can we stop worshipping the goddamn dollar in a way that makes us all so vulnerable to both deceit and to being fooled into a bad record deal. Like, it's ridiculous to me to hear how, oh my god, they only made a small portion, just a measly 60 million profit. Seriously?
Years. So things objectively aren't as good as they used to be. When a lot of people think about inflation, they think about the effect it's having on their everyday lives, which is understandable, okay, because that's the only thing we know. But I want you to realize that this concept applies to the music business as well. We're talking increased touring costs, which is where artists make the majority of their money. This includes rising fuel prices, venue rental fees, and labor costs. This is making touring significantly more expensive. Artists are finding it harder to profit from live performances, which is why so many musicians are not only canceling but also scaling back on touring. This is of course connected to the consumer, because if it's more expensive to tour for an artist, that obviously drives up the prices.
This is absolutely true. And if it's more expensive with a ticket, then the people are less likely to buy it, because let's be honest, a $200 ticket versus a $400 ticket is a big difference, because everything is now 5% or 10% more expensive. It is a very sad world like that, honestly.
They set on things like tickets. So the consumers are facing higher ticket prices as these costs are passed on, factoring in the increased price of raw materials for physical products like vinyls and higher shipping costs, which is impacting the distribution of physical media. This of course puts immense pressure on profit margins for the record labels, because if their artists aren't making as much money, that affects their bottom line. Inflation is driving up costs across the board in the music industry, from live performances to physical product production, while also potentially reducing consumer spending power.
But we've already had a massive consumer spending power. I watched a video not too long ago showing us that we had that the same amount of stuff that people had and could buy in the 60s, 70s is like 80% more at least, like on the low end. It was like, for us to live the way they did on 40,000, we have to make like 180 or something. It was like ridiculous amounts. And when you see that and you think about, hey, let's go to a concert. Oh, well, the concert price, the ticket price is up 450% since 1980. Pure example. This is not a set in stone number. I'm giving this as an example, okay?
Since so many people in general are struggling financially and inflation is putting such pressure on household budgets overall, the consumer is going to prioritize essential goods over discretionary spending like concert tickets, merchandise, and music subscriptions.
Yeah, food,
overall,
baby.
Less money is being put into the music industry due to the lack of consumer spending. And the creation of the music in itself is actually a very costly aspect of the process. Most industry artists aren't do-it-yourself musicians because they don't write, record, produce, mix, and release out of their bedroom.
Maybe they should learn to write at least. Maybe they should learn to produce. Maybe you have to be a little bit more of a do-it-all nowadays, rather than just being party.
In that case, why would they sign to a major label? Like to drink and smoke some Doja, and I feel like smoking platinum. Yeah. So unless you fall under the category of someone like Russ, who does everything in-house, as soon as you enter the industry, you're going to pay industry prices just to create the art. This is something Florida singer and songwriter Money Along spoke about recently. Money Along...
I'm sorry. She's called Money Along. Come on, people. Stop worshipping money. I mean, I love money as much as the next person. I don't even love it. I like money as much as the next person. But come on. It's like, if I done got 100 stack, I ain't going nowhere. I'm like, yeah. What do you mean? What do you mean you have to have 100 stacks? Like, why? Like, what's the point? Do you want to buy a Gucci bag? Do you want to buy a Ferrari? Is that the goal of life? If that's the goal of life, keep chasing money. If you want to actually have a community and have something meaningful, you want to learn something meaningful, even if your art is meaningful, Tyler the Creator is a great example of this, then you're not going to be just chasing the dollar. It's such a sad life.
Has for a long time been a successful writer in the music business, but during her rise as an artist after a hit song Hours and Hours blew up, she spoke about some of the things she realized about how expensive it can be just to record music.
I gotta mix it. That's money per song. Now that's 14 songs on this album. The last album was 19. So studios typically for a 12-hour block is $1,200. Then the session engineer is $75 to $100 an hour.
Wait, $1,200 for... How much does it cost to set up a studio? Let's find out a professional studio. Let's find the quick one. So, how much to make a respectable professional grade recording studio? A minimal for respectable member of industry, 100k. Okay. It starts with buying a place where you can build the whole thing, or maybe own a house or something. Okay, it doesn't matter. Let's say I think London studio is about 100k, 60k for 4 separate soundproof rooms. Yeah, okay. So they're saying a lot of different things here, but let's actually go for the higher end here, right? Let's say it is 100k. Isn't it just straight up more valuable for you to buy your own studio if you have 40 songs on 1200? Like, I mean, it's gonna cost you 100k, but at least you can even rent it out for half the price, because you don't need to pay for studio sessions. Maybe I'm not seeing the problem here, but if you are already paying bordering 30k to rent the studio for the amount of the 12-hour blocks that she needed, isn't it just better to pay 3 times as much and have unlimited studio time?
Add that up. Say you do 7 sessions a week, $10,000 just on sessions, and then making anywhere from $2,500 to $10,000 a track. That's 19 tracks, so that's $100,000. And now you gotta pay for the beats. So they're anywhere from $5,000 to $40,000 a track, depending on who you're working with. And sometimes there's multiple producers, so you gotta pay this fee, this fee, this fee, this fee. I didn't realize how much money that it takes to actually be an artist. This is before you.
It doesn't take that much money to be an artist. That's a bullshit statement. You see people making their whole thing themselves. You see people mixing their own beats. You see people producing their own songs. You see people owning their own studios. Once you set these things up, yes, it might cost you 200k. But once you set this up and you have some of the skills, it doesn't cost to be an artist. What it costs is to have it streamlined for you as an artist. That's a very different thing. If you need somebody to write it for you, if you need somebody to produce it for you, if you need you need to hire a studio, if you need all those things, it's a very different thing. You're not costing to be an artist. You can go out in the street and playing with a guitar or playing with drums. That costs nothing. It just costs time and effort to become good. So, I call cap.
You market, this is before you shoot a video, this is before you do an appearance.
This is why a lot of your favorite artists in the industry are actually struggling. Believe it or not, a lot of artists are surviving off of the advance money they receive from the record labels. And that money, which is a loan, of course, has to be paid back through your record sales. Every aspect of the process, whether it's music videos, marketing, securing features, first-class flights, has to be recouped by the label. But what happens when people aren't streaming your records?
Again, you could do something as simple as what Stormzy did on Shut Up. He just literally stands there and sings. It's same with Heavy is Crown. You know, Heavy is the head that wears the crown. You know that song? Yeah, exactly, that one. There's him just rapping by himself, and there's a whole choir up there. Maybe he hired a choir, and that's the only expense he had. He doesn't have, well, maybe also the camera, but like, there's not necessary to have a large dolly. There's not necessary to have loads of changes of location. There's not necessary to have hundreds of actors, etc., etc. So you can do things cheap. They just don't want to, because it's all about money. It's about a Honda stack. It's about a Lamborghini. It's about this. We are on a yacht. We popping champagne. And that is not. That is a choice. That's a conscious choice.
And you signed the infamous 360 deal, which allows the label to essentially eat off of all your income streams. You have a situation where you get stuck in the recoupment phase for an eternity, which is another way of staying in debt. New York rapper Fat Joe, who a lot of people will recognize from the song Lean Back, spoke about how an album he dropped over 20 years ago that sold over 2 million records still has him in a place till this day where he owes his previous label money.
Scientist
Jesus Christ.
who wins the Nobel Peace Prize to do the accounting on major labels' math, and they always can't figure it out. And so it's robbery all the way through. And you sing your life, your pain, your this, that, and they own your shit. So that's why I say it's a Ponzi scheme. I sold 2 million records, still ain't recouped. I have an album, Jose sold 2 million records. When I get my statement from the major label 20 years later, I still owe them money.
Okay, this is wild. Like, I'm not taking into consideration how wild this is, because this is absolutely nuts. But that's also because there's sketchy financing going on there. Like, it's sketchy deals being made. It's sketchy problems, you know?
20 years later, I still owe them money. I put out an album independently on Empire and get distribution, My album might sell 250, 300,000 records. I make millions of dollars off of it.
Method Man, which is another legacy act in hip-hop, revealed this year that he's never received a single check from streaming in his career.
You know, honestly, I've never gotten a streaming check for any of my music. I've never gotten a streaming check for any of my music. Like I said, I'm still trying to figure it all out.
Which is insane to even think about.
They're still trying to figure it all out because the people that are doing these things are just really, really good at law and really good at how to rope people into contracts. And honestly, that shit should be illegal, but it's also very difficult to say, oh, let's say you got 500k advance payment and you have to pay back that with 4% interest. People don't actually understand how much 4% interest is on 500k over 10 years. Like, it's a lot of money.
Wow. So even the older artists who've been around for some time don't have it figured out the way you think they do. The reality is people are just not buying albums like they used to. And since the monetary payouts to individual artists is extremely low, this is a very unsustainable model set in place, which is leaving many musicians financially vulnerable in 2024. Artists are not only dependent on touring and merchandise sales, which is becoming more costly for the consumer, a lot of artists on these major labels are also facing continuous pressure to release content in the form of music and digital content without seeing a substantial increase in royalties. The record labels are far more focused on short-term streaming trends, and this hit-driven market makes it harder for artists to build long-lasting careers. These layoffs and cuts in artist rosters also means less support for musicians in terms of promotion and A&R development, and that's leading to the artists shouldering more of the financial and marketing budget themselves, which is the entire point of signing to a record label. You're gambling on other people's money with the help of this infrastructure that's supposed to propel your name beyond ways you could do it yourself. What happens when half the building that was championing your artistry gets dropped overnight and you're now left to fend for yourself? The truth is, a lot of artists in the industry are coming to terms with the fact that everything is truly not what it seems.
Well, everything has always, it's never been what it really seems. It's the same in Hollywood, it's the same in most creative industries. Maybe except for, well, maybe fine arts is just a bit more, I guess fine arts is a bit more like elitist rather. I guess acting is as well. I'm not sure about music, honestly, but I know at least for the acting world, which I've been a part of for a long time, it's very, very elitist when it comes to what school you came out of, especially in the UK. But in America, it's not so bad. It's more like, oh, who do you know in Hollywood and stuff.
Prince did, after all, call record contracts another form of slavery. This is something he realized after the battle for his master recordings, which led to him changing his name to a symbol in the 90s as a form of protest against his record label, Warner Bros. Tupac is another good example of this conversation, because Tupac wasn't as rich as you would think he was looking from the outside. After his death, Pac's family discovered that he was millions of dollars in debt to his record label, Death Row Records. Not only that, but the house that he had supposedly purchased before his passing wasn't even in his name.
I discovered he had next to zero, next to nothing. I discovered that the home that he had thought that he had just bought was not his.
Afeni Shakur says her son deserved a lot more than he ended up with.
I say that the entertainment business is a business of prostitution and thievery.
Well, it is, because the people at the top are the ones making the money off of you as a worker. That's very sad. And that's kind of why things like Twitch, Kick, streaming platforms, YouTube, all these things that have made you go direct to consumer instead of via, well, maybe not direct to consumer because it's via YouTube or via Twitch. So they're taking a cut, but it's at least a fundamentally understandable situation. Hey, we take 50%, or hey, we take however many percent the other platforms would take. And then everything else is direct to consumer. Of course, they could be sneaky when it comes to how advertisement and stuff is, how much money they take on actual advertisements and stuff, and they actually don't show you the real numbers, of course, but at least we understand what we're getting into.
And that was rampant around my son's talent, you know.
The truth is that Tupac got stuck in the recoupment phase because the lifestyle he was living was fueled by the millions of dollars his label was fronting him, which was a necessity for him due to the fact that his career was filled with a whole host of legal troubles that he was constantly fighting with that money, and all those expensive video shoots weren't going to be paid by themselves, so the costs were racking up, and the ugly discovery made by his mother led to immense disappointment as she realized her son didn't have a lot of money to his name to begin with. These stories are not uncommon, as a lot of artists are in a perpetual state of debt to their record labels, something that doesn't get discovered by the majority until the minority decide to hire an independent lawyer with no ties to the music industry for an audit. Rapper Chamillionaire is a great example of this. Chamillionaire is a 44-year-old rapper born in Washington, D.C., raised in Houston, Texas, who found success in the rap industry in the mid-2000s with the song.
I mean, that's the first thing I would do. I would hire a lawyer. I'm like, hey, yo, I want you to oversee my stuff. You're not going to be tied to the music industry, but I want you to have commercial law understanding. Because if they're tied to the music industry, they're most likely going to be on somebody's payroll. I don't want that.
Ryan.
Oh, him, yeah. The hating.
Chamillionaire rode that high for a few years, but ended up having other aspirations that didn't involve just being a rapper. Later in life, with the rap money he had acquired, Chamillionaire became a serial investor and entrepreneur who now has an estimated net worth of $50 million. Chamillionaire, so he went the good way. As a rapper, started connecting the dots in regards to how the music industry actually works. Just like a lot of artists in the end do, he realized that he was simply getting ripped off and managed to get out of his contract with Sony. Before he did that, however, Chamillionaire discovered $600,000 that was hidden by his record label, and that only happened after he hired a lawyer that did an audit of his financials.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Like the fact is, these people that are doing the deals are sketchy as fuck. So you need somebody on your side to actually audit it, because I'm not good enough at auditing where the money is and everything, where it's coming from, etc. So therefore, I want somebody who's doing this for a living. Come on, I'll pay you, and you do the job for me. Yeah, dog, that's how it works.
In relation to the label,
I believe that when the check gets handed to an artist, the check is normally not right. The first person that told me this was Nelly. Nelly told me, you know, you got to learn how to do this thing called an audit. And I was like, what is that? And then he was like, man, you got to get a lawyer. And so I searched, I found Jay-Z's auditor, right? So he goes and he finds over $600,000 that the label hid from me. So I was like, wait a second, is this the way it always is? He's like, yeah, you got to keep on doing this.
Chamillionaire is one of the rare cases in music of someone who ended up coming out on top in the end, because that's not usually how things go. A lot of artists have sadly been sold a lie of fortune, not realizing that it all does come at a cost that sometimes is too late to come back from. Luckily, with the abundance of information in this day and age, and people like me and other platforms speaking on this, I think there will be a rise in the truth prevailing.
It will definitely be a rise, and it'll probably be a rise in independent artists and independent venues and stuff. Because after the great the great virus happened, a lot of theaters in the UK closed. A lot of them closed. Almost everything closed. And I don't know about Europe, because I moved to Europe afterwards, but a lot of smaller venues closed, and therefore for small theater productions and small scale artists like musicians and stuff didn't have as much of an easy time to get a smaller venue. And I think that it's going to be a rise of that again. I think it's going to be a lot more intimate, certainly, because there's too much manufactured music and too much manufactured stuff. So I think people want the authenticity again soon.
Because, believe it or not, the majority of people still don't know any of these things I talked about in relation to the music business.
That's
the
wild.
Lies have been marketed at such a big scale. It's became the truth to the masses, and it's due to both the public and the musician being uninformed that the corporations are able to keep making their money, because the music industry is a revolving door. For every artist that gets dropped, there's 10 more that get signed at the same time. And statistically, 80% of them have no clue what's waiting on the other side. Even the ones who are in the knowing end up getting blindsided at some point.
Yeah, because it's very easy to still, you think you know, and then you slip up one day and you sign a contract that's shit, and then you find out, oh wow, I owe royalty of 10% of this album for the rest of my life.
Even though the business of music will never die, the industry aspect is in fact dying, because the industry is based on a lie and an illusion and a skewed perception of what it means to make it. The glass is getting shattered as we speak. The rooms are emptying themselves out. Cool. The queue to the entrance is getting shorter, and let's just say that the party is in fact dying. Anyway, appreciate you for making it till the end. Before you leave, make sure you drop a like on this video, because obviously you enjoyed it.